Hi, I'm back. I'm already up to like 3 videos today, which is good to get some stuff out for people because I obviously have subscribers and it's nice for them to have something to watch. Although this video is a specific response video to another YouTuber that does black politics, especially around reparations and things like that. So if you're like a feminist watching this, especially a white feminist watching this, don't don't take this as an opportunity to go to that page and start talking about these issues. You can just kind of just watch it here. But I am hoping that some of Yvette Carnell's audience, the person to whom I'm responding, will get a chance to come over here and take a look at this and get a different, just a slightly expanded viewpoint on some of the things that Yvette Carnell was discussing on her show. So if you're new to me. My name is Jessica Gonzalez. I have this little channel that I started because I can't find people that share my politics. So here we go. The first thing I want to do is talk about what Yvette Carnell's show was. So she has a show with, she calls it Breaking Bad. It's on YouTube. It's on Mondays and Wednesday nights. It's a really, really great program. And in her last episode, though, wasn't so great because it talked about the black patriarchy. And it basically, and in that episode, Yvette Carnell basically called out intersectional feminism as not being useful. As, essentially, I understood it as not being useful to the black community because, you know, in her estimation, what it does is lay the blame for black women's oppression at the feet of black men. And I think obviously that really couldn't be further from the truth. So first, and here's something I didn't really like about Yvette's episode is that she didn't the terms weren't defined, right? So the audience, we were all kind of expected to more or less understand, already have an understanding of these terms or what we're talking about, and maybe her audience really does, but for me, somebody who watches her show on occasion, I felt like it's best to start with defining the term. So the first term I'm going to define here is going to be patriarchy. Yvette Carnell referred to patriarchy a few times in her episode and described it as a system of political power. And she further added on that in America, political power is defined by wealth, and that's why, you know, black men can't have political, can't be patriarchs in America. I would argue with, I would argue with that. But first, let me just define patriarchy as a social arrangement which puts females below males. Meaning that in a patriarchy, females live to serve males and male needs. And that's exactly what we have here in the United States, pretty much globally. So really anywhere you look globally, what are women doing? Women are at home tending to children because they're giving birth to the children. Males don't do that. So the whole patriarchy spins out of the fact that there's a difference between males and females in reproductive role and workload. So women, because we have the burden of gestating for 9 months to carry a child's term, we are in an especially vulnerable position, which males a long time ago, and I don't know how or when, learned to exploit by, I don't know, I'm assuming it was sheer violence, as a way to keep women already in a vulnerable position further subjugated and subservient. And then from there, you know, it just kind of snowballed, and now we have a full system that's global where females are servants to males, pretty much across the board. There are some societies where that isn't exactly the case, or it isn't as brutal, but that is just a fact. So the fact of a global patriarchy can't be denied, just like the fact of a global white supremacy can't be denied. That's just it. The next term I want to define is feminism. Feminism. A lot of people in the mainstream want to define feminism as a fight for equality between the sexes. I think that's a very convenient definition because it assumes that females, women are happy with the current state, the frameworks that have been put in place, the governments that have been put in place, and our only quarrel is with the fact that we're not equal to men in those institutions and within those dynamics. And I would offer that that is absolutely incorrect. My definition of feminism, which is a radical definition of feminism, is about the liberation of females from male supremacist rule. So basically meaning that we would like a role in redetermining the Constitution and what social institutions and things are put in place, and how, fundamentally capitalism is anti-feminist, it's anti-woman, it's anti-female, because it relies on the notion that there's going to be people excluded from resources. Like, necessarily people have to be excluded from resources for capitalism to work. So that, I would say, is inherently counter-feminist. I think that's really important to realize, that feminism has to be, necessarily must be, about liberating females from male rule. Not about equality, not about the same pay, not about this or that. Liberating females from these structures and these mores and these hierarchies that have oppressed us from the beginning of what they call civilization. Okay, so the last thing I want to define, and let me try to start moving along quickly here because I have so much to cover, is intersectional feminism. Intersectional feminism is a feminism developed by Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a lawyer. I went to law school, so I actually didn't learn about Kimberly Crenshaw at law school, but having understanding that her framework was actually written as a law review article, which is different from sociological scholarly work, in that it is grounded in the rule of law. So what you're trying to solve, more or less, usually, is a legal problem. So intersectional feminism, and this is where I'm pretty disappointed with Yvette, is because she loves to frame things. So here, how I'm going to frame intersectional feminism is, I'm going to frame where intersectional feminism came from. So these allegations by Tommy Curry and by Yvette, that intersectional feminism is devised as a way to blame black men for black women's oppression, is completely erroneous, completely misses the mark, and has nothing to do with anything that actually encouraged the beginning of intersectional feminism. Intersectional feminism was created specifically because, and I have the law review article here, there was a group of plaintiffs, black women plaintiffs, that had been discriminated against between 1964 and 1970 by General Motors. These women tried to take their grievances to court, and the court would not allow them, because you had to make a claim for either race discrimination or sex discrimination. You couldn't make it on both. And as black women, we are subject to both race discrimination and sex discrimination. So the fact that those plaintiffs were barred from bringing such an action essentially disenfranchised them in the eyes of the law. So now, knowing the framing of why intersectional feminism is even important, now we can begin to understand why it's necessary. And again, the fight in feminism, period, is about liberating males from females. Females from males. So there is no room for males in feminism. There is no room for males in feminism. Now, one can argue, oh, that's bad. We don't want to be separating our females from our males. We want to keep our communities together on all the different fronts, and that's a perfectly valid attack, I guess, on or critique of intersectional feminism, the fact that it is a feminism. But that's what we have to understand, is that it is a feminism. It does not exist to cure every single problem that is of or relating to sex or gender. That's really not the purpose of it. It is specifically to capture the suffering of women that aren't just white women, women that have different other things that kind of coalesce to create special obstacles for them. So, for example, a white woman with a disability might fall under, or I would say, I guess does fall under intersectional feminism, because she isn't just white and a woman. She's got some special other things that make that initial hardship, if we could call it that much harder to bear. Like, her life is that much harder because she has all these other situations she has to be in. Okay, so, and then the third thing I want to talk about before I go into the actual critique of some of the points I heard in the video is I want to address perversions of intersectionality. So there are a lot of men calling themselves intersectional feminists. There are a lot of white women calling themselves intersectional feminists. That is not appropriate. I mean, sure, white women can be intersectional feminists if they have other intersections of oppression. Males can never be intersectional feminists because they are not females fighting for their liberation from male oppression and rule. Recently, not like super recently, but over the past couple of years, maybe a decade, intersectionality has been hijacked by the postmodernist movement and is been perverted into something it wasn't meant to be. So intersectionality today, if you look it up on Google, if you go on everyday feminism and things like that, intersectional feminism is going to be basically defined as whatever you identify as is supreme, and nobody can question your suffering, and nobody can claim that they suffered more or whatever. And I don't understand where all this comes from, but what I can tell you is that the trans agenda, the male trans movement, which is white trans women, including, and you can start with Caitlyn Jenner, and right on through, have really made it a point to commandeer intersectionality, intersectional feminism, which was about women facing separate kinds of oppression, black, female, and making it about anything. I have a strong political belief that trans people are not oppressed on the basis of being trans, and that if we really were to look at the data and look at the information, we can find that yes, some of them are indeed oppressed, are systemically oppressed, but for reasons other than being trans itself. And if you want to look into this and verify what I'm talking about here, you just can punch into Google Jennifer Pritzker, who was a big Obama donor, who has been pouring millions of dollars worldwide into normalizing transness and into basically, I would say, hijacking feminism for the trans agenda. So now that I'm done with all that, okay, I'm gonna go through some of the things that I observed in the actual video. So, when Yvette starts the show, she starts. Okay, yeah, here she goes. She starts with a study from the New York Times that found that the name of the article in the New York Times was "Extensive Data Shows Punishing Reach of Racism for Black Boys." And if you'll remember, this was the study that shows that a wealth gap exists for males versus females. For white males, over black males, regardless of where their parents were in the economic ladder, but the same isn't true for black women, meaning black women were marginally better compensated than white women, which is surprising, when we account for the income bracket or the income standing of their family, the family in which they grew up. And I thought that this was a very curious and a very, I just thought this was a very curious article to choose for this, to talk about black patriarchy and intersectionality, because this article isn't about females, and it isn't about female liberation, and it isn't about the intersections of female oppression or suffering. So, Vet says at one point, she literally says this: intersectionalism doesn't seem to make very much sense based on the study that I'm looking at. You're looking at a study that isn't about intersectionalism, that isn't about intersectionality, that isn't about females, and isn't about female liberation. So where exactly are we supposed to find support for intersectionality in an article, in research, in data that isn't about it, and didn't seem. I went through the data. I went through the study, not just the article. I went through the study, and it didn't seem to make pay special attention to discrepancies between or problems for black girls and women in particular. So of course this information is not going to lead you to satisfying your curiosity about intersectionality. That's not what this study's about. But I will say this is something that I found really quite interesting in that study that they were saying does not satisfy intersectionality. Here's one thing that the study did find. A study found that the gap between incomes for whites, male, female, black, white males over black males versus black females, white females over black females. The gap is significantly smaller for boys who grow up in certain neighborhoods. In certain neighborhoods, 1, those with low poverty rates, 2, low levels of racial bias amongst whites, and 3, high rates of father presence among low-income blacks. So what this study found is that there are things that can be done in these boys' lives as youngsters, if done by a certain age. If these 3 things are corrected for in young boys, then that gap between white men and black men can shrink in the future. So what does this tell me? This shows me that it isn't heightened discrimination against black men as adults that caused this problem. But in fact, it's just that our black boys need these certain additional supports for whatever reason in order to be able to get that gap closed later on in life. So I would proffer that this study seems to actually kind of support the fact that there is no overarching special discrimination that black men face over black women. They live different lives, but I'm not willing yet to concede that black men are especially disadvantaged over black women in this society. No, not yet, not by a long shot. Let's see. Yeah, so here are 2 other things. Here are 2 other things that I wanted to... One thing that Yvette brings up, several times, and rightly so, if you come from her viewpoint, rightly so, if you come from that believing that intersectionality is about blaming black men, is she says, the key question to her is, who is doing the oppressing? So, we're talking about a black patriarchy, But if there are no black patriarchs to do the oppressing, then we can't be using intersectionality, because intersectionality only exists to place blame on black males. No. Intersectionality doesn't care who's doing the oppressing. It cares who is being oppressed. I'm going to say it again. Intersectional feminism does not care who is doing the oppressing. It cares about who is being oppressed. So in intersectional feminism, it's always going to be concerning a woman, a female seeking liberation from the patriarchy, that faces at least one additional intersection of oppression on top of simply being a female that is seeking liberation from the patriarchy. So these questions of, well, who is doing the oppressing? Who is locking up black men? Is it black women? No? Okay. You know, moving on. Okay, here's Dr. Curry. Dr. Curry, by the way, I'm not convinced Dr. Curry is a very courageous fellow, because I think he blocked me on Facebook. And I think he blocked somebody else I know too. This is what happens when people are too invested in some weird belief they have. Okay, so when Dr. Curry, sounding like he was in a tin can, came on. Okay, so what's the first thing he says? I just wrote, I don't know if you can see this, I just have numbered things, and I'm going to try to get through as many as I can. I don't want this to be longer than 30 minutes, but it might go a little long, but let me do the best I can. Okay, so his first thing was, our current discourse doesn't allow us to adequately capture information on the negative effects of sex crimes on males. Tommy Curry talks a lot about black male victims of sexual abuse and assault, and I think rightly so. I think this comment is flawed. This claim here is fundamentally flawed. Our current discourse doesn't allow us to adequately capture info. If you are limiting the current discourse to only intersectional feminism, and you're expecting it to carry the weight of male childhood sexual assault and abuse, it can't do that. That's not the appropriate vehicle. Those issues are things that need to be studied and looked into, obviously, but intersectional feminism isn't the tool for that. So to lay it at the feet of intersectional feminism that it doesn't solve this problem, it never tried to. 2, he cites, oh my God, this was so inflammatory. This was just disgusting. The second thing he does is he cites Catherine McKinnon to support his claim that radical feminists consider even consensual sexual intercourse to be rape. First of all, Catherine McKinnon is a white lady. She's not an intersectional feminist. This claim that she made, somebody who's white and not an intersectional feminist made, claiming that even consensual sexual intercourse, penis and vagina intercourse is rape, that was just a smear. That was just a smear. Okay, so Yvette Carnell, I wish you had recognized that this was just an out-and-out smear, and you had stopped it from going on the air on your show, because intersectional feminism is a black woman's feminism that you're allowing this black male to just shit and smear all over. Catherine McKinnon has nothing to do with intersectionality. Number 3, let me see. Oh yeah, he says people misuse studies when he's talking about the Black Women's Blueprint and the fact that X amount of black women have been subject to sexual assault or rape or just physical assault at the hands of a black male partner. I think that's how it went. And he cites that that black males have their first sexual experience at 12 or 13. And then again, that's a really horrendous thing. I would point towards the fact that that social expectations around sex frame those things to make them seem as though a young boy who sleeps with an older, not sleeps, who's raped by an older woman at such an age is seen as some kind of a social accomplishment. And that's the sickness of our patriarchy. But that is a problem of patriarchy, which isn't to say that it isn't women that are doing this violation, but it is to say that the sense that male conquest is to be venerated or highly regarded is a sickness of patriarchy, and that fact I don't think can be laid at the feet of intersectional feminism either. Like that also that also is just not something that this is meant to address. It's something obviously that needs to be considered and discussed and talked about in all communities. But no, and then the notion that people misuse studies, well that's what this show's doing. That's what not mine. That's what that episode of Breaking Brown did. Is completely just plugged a New York Times article, recent one, and just said, oh, like intersectional feminism doesn't apply to this article that I read last week, so it must be bullshit. Okay, the fourth thing. Here's a good one. Yvette said, how do men with no money and no power enforce a patriarchy? Well, Yvette, recently you had an episode, well, you have a lot of episodes that talk about social control and the media selling us degeneracy, and having, putting social control in place in Black and brown communities by encouraging deviant and destructive behavior. And I would say that you don't need power. You don't need money and social power to enforce a patriarchy that exists in the minds of individuals in interpersonal relationships, if that makes sense. So, when it's, I'm not a player, I just crush a lot and things like that. Now it's expected that males are going to go around and doing these kinds of things. Well, that is a patriarchy. That is male conquest and dominance over females, and that doesn't require societal leverage, and it doesn't require societal wealth to affect that. Is one of the things I would say in response to that. If you're looking for, well, how can this be possible, I would offer that's one way in which it can be possible. That's one way in which sexism does manifest itself in really patriarchal ways in our communities, and I think that's what beyond denial. Let's see, here's another one. Black violence, but violence in Black homes is bidirectional. That's the next thing that Tommy Curry says. I would ask to that, I would need to know much, much more before I believe that, because I've heard that, for example, if I were arguing with my Black husband, he slaps me, I push him, that would be called bidirectional violence, when to me it might be self-defense and the only violence of the interaction from my point of view, real violence would be him slapping me. But I don't know that. They didn't go into that in this episode, but I just want that to be things to think about. I also want to think about, to what degree is it bidirectional? Is it bidirectional every time? Is there more male on female violence in Black homes? What's the incidence of occurrence, right? And then the other thing is, to what end, right? So violence can be bidirectional, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same severity or the same degree, right? So I would ask, how many Black women are living in a state of terror and fear with their Black partner, versus how many Black men feel that same way? The extent of injuries, I would want to know. I would want to know so much more than just calling it bidirectional. That really doesn't satiate my desire to understand what's really at play here. Let's see. Okay, and then the next thing was that Tommy Curry said, okay, well, because the violence is bidirectional, what we see here is that intersectional feminism, again, blaming intersectional feminism for claims it does not make. Intersectional feminism relies on racist stereotypes such as tropes about black males being particularly violent in order to assign that blame to the black males. And I would respond to this with you might be right if intersectional feminism were about blaming black males, first of all, but second of all, I would stand up for black women and say, well, black women are black women straight harassing black men at the same to the same extent? Like, how often does that happen? Do they murder black men to the same degree or the same extent? Do they rape black men in the same numbers, the same degree, same extent? Like, these are all, you can't just call it a stereotype if the numbers don't pan out. And I have no way to know that the numbers that Tommy Curry has in his mind would pan out and would show that dollars to donuts, black males and black females hurt each other to the same degree. I just don't know that. Let's see. Here's one. Okay, so that again brings up who is doing the oppressing. Black men aren't really the oppressors. And I'm again gonna have to bring up the fact that black males don't have to be the oppressors for intersectional feminism to be necessary. And I would bring the Breaking Brown family's attention back to the recent study that Yvette Carnell addressed on her show, which talked about that the maternal death rate for black women is 3 to 4 times higher than for that of white women. How would you account for that? Would you just call that simple racism? I wouldn't. I would call it sexism also, because even though white women are subject to the same birth systems or whatever, they have certainly more access, but black women never had a say in how, and nor did white women, in how gynecology even and obstetrics was developed. So we're coming from way behind, where the people that give birth were not consulted in determining how women give birth. So I would say that's the sexism, because maternity has been marginalized to this thing, this sidebar thing, where it needs to be something that women, females, the people that give birth and have experience in such, control and own. And then the racism on top of that would be the fact that racist healthcare on top of the lack of agency over the system that controls how women give birth. So that's the sexism. The racism now makes it so that 3 to 4 times more black women die giving birth than white women. That is why we need intersectional feminism. It's not about blaming black men. It's because black women have one hell of a fucking hard time in this country, and we need to be able to fight on just more than regular white sexism, because we don't face regular white sexism. Okay, so why aren't feminists talking about ending child abuse? I think that you are not following your feminism closely enough if you think that feminism isn't fighting for those goals. And I would argue that somebody like me, I am for the liberation of women from men, but I actually believe that the just social order is matriarchy. And why I believe that is because the safest place I believe children can be is with their mothers, when their mothers are, of course, healthy and have access to all the resources they need to raise their children, their offspring. So I would say, the way that this country separates mothers from children by forcing mothers back into the workplace 6 weeks after giving birth, if that, usually sometimes much sooner, and then the infants have to be put away wherever whether that be daycare, some relative, you know, anytime that you're separating children and mothers, that's where you get opportunities for child abuse. And child abusers, far and wide, largely are males. They are not females. So if you're talking about, you know, how is intersectional feminism going to solve for child abuse? Well, there's nothing about patriarchy that solves for child abuse. Patriarchy is what creates the opportunities for child abuse to even happen. So that point really was just an errant point that made no sense. Okay, we need a new analysis that understands that maleness is not a privilege when combined with blackness, and intersectionality misses that. Intersectionality doesn't care about males. I don't want to say it doesn't care, but it's primarily focused with females that face intersections of oppression. So I think Tommy Curry's perfectly right to begin to explore how gender and sexuality are at play among black males, and what parts of that are holding them back from their development. I think to take turn that into a flaw of intersectional feminism is assigning something to it that it was never meant to do. Yeah. 10. Here's this point. This point is bang on, dude. He says Tommy Curry says, we need to rethink how we conceptualize maleness. Historically, it's been associated with violence and aggression. And I would say that this is exactly what radical feminists want to do. We want to make it so that we want to eradicate femininity and masculinity, those terms that serve just to separate out people and really make us half a person. Every human being should be able to express a full range of emotions, and you shouldn't be limited to anger and aggression because you're male, or submission and meekness because you're female, or whatever. So this is somewhere where Tommy Curry and radical feminists in particular would agree exactly. So you might want to go back, Tommy Curry, and read Catherine McKinnon again, because I feel like you might have more places of agreement than disagreement in some of the things that you claim to be your most pressing concerns. Okay, says okay, yeah, and then Yvette Carnell echoes that maleness and blackness is worse. Again, Yvette, you haven't talked about anything about being a female. You've only talked about a generic human in this system. So a generic human that is somebody who is raised gender neutral, apparently, right? Because but black boys and black girls don't apparently go through the same thing or whatever. And then in adulthood, because black women earn marginally more, I don't know, earn more than white women. She doesn't even say that they earn more than black men. That, you know, watch that, because let's bring that into, and then let's see. But okay, black women have it worse. But what about the things that make us female? What about menstruating, gestating, and lactating? Like, what about the fact that a black male will never risk pregnancy from one of those unfortunate rapes, whereas opposed to a black female might? And, you know, just this rush to exculpate black males from something that they weren't being they weren't being impugned under intersectionality. So I don't even understand where this impulse comes from, but it is not leading to sound claims at the other end. Let's see, what's the next thing. Okay, so how does intersectionality solve for the following? Black men dying earlier, black men not finishing high school, black men being more unemployed, black men facing more downward mobility. And I would say, again, intersectionality does not address any of those, because intersectionality is not for black men. It does not address any of these because it's not for black men. But black men dying younger, yeah, good luck blaming that on intersectionality, because males in general die earlier than females. That's just, we didn't do that. If anything, patriarchy did that. But I don't know. I'm not a biologist, so I can't explain why far and wide women have a longer lifespan. I really couldn't help you there. Let's see. Okay. Here, Yvette Carnell says, the most important thing to me in my life is race. And that's why she doesn't understand intersectional feminism. And I can understand, I can wrap my mind around that. But I would argue, well, my experience, my personal, Jessica Gonzalez's personal individual experience has been completely different. I knew I would be subordinate as a female by the time I was like 7 or 8. And that's really where my fear of oppression came from. And it began with becoming afraid of rape. I knew that males had penises and they used them as psychological weapons. That's really, yeah, that really was what was more important. I didn't notice serious distinctions in race between like black and white so much later, which isn't to say that they didn't exist or they didn't impact my life or whatever. I'm just countering, I'm just providing a counterbalance here, because it really is, for me, I noticed I was female first, and that really made me mad. Okay, what's the next thing? Okay, so this isn't, then Tommy Kerr says, this isn't to say that black men can't be sexist or misogynistic, only that these beliefs are because of internalized racism that comes from a society that lessens black women completely. Bingo. These are his words, comes from a society that lessens black women completely. We're erased completely. So yes, Tommy, this is why intersectional feminism even exists. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. The last thing, they go into wanting to lay causality at the feet of black men. And I think causality in feminism is determined exclusively by whether the victim is a female or a male, and not whether the perpetrator or the whatever else is a male or a female. I think, again, they're misdefining intersectionality. They're calling it, they're attributing things to it that aren't there, that don't exist, so that they can argue against that. I'd like to see a fresh new episode where you actually talk about intersectional feminism, what it is, what it means to black women that are fighting for it and are standing for it, our black academics, which are brilliant, and we have a couple, and then talk about that, because this particular episode was I think it was I think you, I mean, if you, yeah, I mean, I consider this a spit, like, it's like you spit in Kimberly Crenshaw's face. Like, this was just quite insulting. I don't know how to feel. You're about to go, Vivek Carnell's about to go on live now if she's not already. So I want to close. Yep, she's going on live now. So I'm going to close out of this and I'm going to go and watch her, and I might develop the courage to call in if this episode that's starting now addresses some of these issues. So let me go and get to that, and I hope if you watch this, you were able to understand and follow along. If you have any questions, but not abuse, or comments, constructive discussion on this matter, please feel free to leave comments. I welcome them entirely, and talk to you soon.